So my motivation for establishing a printed magazine, when people said it was either dead or dying, it's a crazy kind of thing. Look, I just saw a gap in the market, and largely it was born out of naivety. You know, there wasn't a lot around for entrepreneurs. There wasn't a lot that was inspirational and aspirational and the story behind the story. And I just wanted to create something from the ground up. And so I did. And at the time I had 3 staff under the age of 25, none of whom had ever worked for a magazine, and neither had I. And we went into a market that had 5,500 existing magazines. So it was a really interesting place to start. So when I launched Collective Hub, which was February 2013, I get asked this a lot. Did I reference the existing market? Did I look to other print magazines? And the answer is absolutely not. Because what I knew at the time was that many of them were folding. Some of the biggest titles, Madison, BRW, Grazia, you know, there's so many that have folded since we launched. So what I encourage people to do is not necessarily look within the existing industry. We know there's a market there. You know, the fact that there were 5,500 print magazines that existed at the time says that there is a market. But what I looked at was, what are case studies from other markets? So I looked at Uber, I looked at Airbnb, I looked at Tinder, I looked at all sorts of other things and how they were disrupting age-old industries. And what I would say about that is, get excited about existing markets that have been around, or existing products that have been around for years and years and years and years, because it means that there is an appetite for that product, but it's just about how do we do it differently? How do we, you know, shake it up? How do we buck the status quo? And that's my biggest thing. We don't necessarily have to reinvent something from scratch, and we don't necessarily have to create an entirely new vertical or an entirely new industry. And I think that's where the real opportunities lie for those of us who think differently. Yeah, hiring people is a really interesting one, and certainly when I was in startup mode at the infancy of the business, I hired people always 100% on attitude over experience. However, we're now a rather large business across 37 different countries, and we have 12 different verticals, so there's a lot going on, and so I'm finding more and more that I need to now actually hone in on some skill sets. And I think it's like any business, you know, when you're in startup mode, everyone does everything, and then as you grow, people tend to become more specialized. But for the most part, experience, you know, attitude trumps experience every single time. So the power of community and collaboration and lifting each other higher and working together is absolutely at the cornerstone of everything I do. And here's my take on it. I think people want a sense of belonging. So I've always said that whilst I own Collective Hub 100% financially, that it's not me that owns it at all, it's our community. And so from the get-go, we've always put it out there and involved them and asked their opinion and made them feel a part of it. And as a result, I have never ever in my entire life experienced anything like the following and the people who get behind us and the support. It's quite extraordinary. So the simple answer is just give people a chance to belong, and they will do anything for you. Success. I always do that because people go, oh, you're successful. I'm like, what is success? I always say, you know, yes, it's a really big journey, but if it was a book, and it's fast becoming one, we would literally be on paragraph 1, page 1. But I think success really comes down to a few things. One is, you know, having an unwavering self-belief, knowing what your purpose and your vision and your values and your, you know, unwavering not negotiables are, having an extraordinary team, and that can be full-time internal people, or that can be freelancers or consultants or a myriad of other things, doesn't really matter these days. Tenacity, ability to fail fast, so many things, but I think probably in a nutshell, they're some of the key ones. So interestingly enough, and counterintuitive to what most people might think. The key defining moments in my life absolutely have been the hardest moments in my life. So when I look at the big successes that I've had, the very first was when I wrote a book called Happiness Is in 2004. It was my first foray into publishing, and essentially I was unbelievably unhappy. My life, I was living according to other people's expectations, and it was quite frankly a train smash. So I went out searching for what happiness meant, and I put together this book, and it went on to sell 36,000 copies when a bestseller at the time in Australia was 5,000, and so then I was very happy. And so what I would say about that is for people to look for what are their pain points, what are their frustrations, what are they pissed off about, and it could be as simple as I've had a baby and the nappy is rubbing the baby or something like that, and so you go, wow, that's a pain point. Is there an opportunity for me to start a nappy company? I always look at what's really irking me at any particular time. What am I frustrated with? It could be physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it is, and then I look for, if I'm feeling that, is there a gap in the market? And 100% of the time they have been my biggest successes. Collective Hub was kind of the same. There was so much media out there, but there was so much negativity and so much salacious gossip and vacuous content, and it was perpetuated through every medium, and I just thought there's got to be more. And so I kind of could get angry and upset about it, or I could do something about it. So with no knowledge, I decided to launch my own product. So I think the balance between commercial reality and passion and our hunger and what we want to do and what drives us to jump out of bed every single day kind of have to sit side by side. And I think anyone who kind of says they're just in it for the money, then I can pretty much say 100% it's not going to work. And conversely, if you're just there for the passion and it's a passion project and actually you don't have the business acumen, you're probably not going to work either. So it's finding that sort of happy medium between the two. I think that's really important. So disruption is a really interesting topic, and in fact I think there's hardly a corporate in Australia that I haven't spoken to about this topic, because everyone is always wanting to be Uber or be Uberized, or as I like to say, collective or collectivized. And the big question is, how do we stay relevant? In actual fact, when I started Collective Hub almost 4 years ago, I didn't have a strategy at all. In fact, I think often in startup mode, it's good to have, back of the envelope and kind of a big overarching vision as to where you're going, but don't labor too much on a, 60-page business plan. Just get out there, test, iterate, morph, pivot, change, whatever it is, and move wherever the market takes you. And I think that's what we have as startups, and indeed as disruptors. We can actually, we can change, and we can, just stay relevant, and we can move, and we can be nimble, and we can be flexible, and all those other things that big corporates can't. They have so much bureaucracy and red tape that's holding them back. So just be flexible. Yeah, the word disruption is really interesting because everyone kind of says now it's a buzzword, and I'm like, oh my God, I called my first book in this series Daring and Disruptive when the word disruptive wasn't around so much. Look, I think, we just have to keep changing words all the time. Disruption is really interesting for me though, and if anyone who's listening goes back perhaps to when they're at school, I was a disruptor. I was permanently sitting outside the classroom. I never learned anything. In fact, I remember my maths teacher, Mr. Kamarami, picking me up on my chair, carrying me outside the classroom and putting me outside and closing the door, because I always asked, but why, but how, but how? And interestingly enough, it's that same thinking these days as an entrepreneur that holds me in good stead and is in fact celebrated. So disruption, can have bad connotations, or in fact it can have something really, really positive. So I think it's an interesting word. I think the word is interchangeable, but I think for the most part, the feeling and the underlying sentiment is the same. What differentiates Collective Hub most from other magazines is that it's really not about the magazine. So This is as simple or as complex as my entire vision gets. Collective Hub exists to ignite human potential. That is it. So the thing about that is, it doesn't matter then on the delivery mechanism. It doesn't matter if it's a print magazine, if it's social media, if it's collectivehub.com online, or if I'm speaking, or if I'm writing books, or if we're producing education, or a myriad of other delivery mechanisms. And I think the problem these days is too many people focus on the product. They focus on, I'm going to deliver a chair. This is a product. They don't think about, I'm going to deliver something extraordinary for people to have an amazing seated experience. Because what happens in 6 months' time if we're all on flying carpets? So I think Collective Hub is different and it connects with people because it's come from a really simple place, and that is really me. As an entrepreneur who started my first business in October 2001, so over 15 years ago, what do I want to know? And I have an inquisitive and very curious mind, and I'm always asking how and why, and I'm reverse engineering everything. And so what I did was, and it's interesting being on this side of the media now, you take, say, a beauty product, or say a table. People will come to us and they'll want us to do a story on this table, and it would be like, most media would talk about the aesthetic of the table. It's square and it's brown and it's this. And I go, who started this table? How did they build this table? How did they fund it? Where was it manufactured? Who's the market for this table? And so what's interesting is it essentially came out of my own curiosity and my own yearning to know more about things and the story behind the story. And so I think that's why it resonates with so many people, because we go so much deeper into any kind of brand or, person or, anything else. And I think that's why it resonates so much.